Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Lieutenant General Bob Wood.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I can see the lights are starting to dawn back here. We're opening up. After this panel, we'll open the floor formally. It's a great show we have, not only in here, but out there through those doors. We thank you for returning for our panel, final panel of the day before we go into our reception. And this panel today will talk about DOD collaboration for success in cyber. I found a quote on one of General Lynn's slides. It said from General Secretary Mattis, "We have one common mission, and that calls upon all hands to strive together." You listen to what industry had to describe in terms of how they do collaboration and innovation in cyberspace. It's only right that we now have a panel to talk about the DOD and DOD components and their collaboration for success in cyber. And we're doing that with a panel, as you see before you here, and I think a very talented and diverse panel. And we are led, that panel is led by General Skinner. General Skinner is the Deputy Commander of Joint Force Headquarters Doden, and I think a perfect moderator for this integrated perspective on the DOD collaborative effort. He's responsible for the command and control of defensive cyberspace activities, and he focuses on the unity of command and effort within the Department of Defense in this important area. He assists JFHQ Doden, the commander, the Doden commander, with organizing, training, and equipping the military and civilian force. Now, I've got a lot about his background and experience. I can tell you his performance is what has marked this officer. I first met General Skinner at Fort Leavenworth when he was a student there and excelling in a variety of ways in terms of defining our warfighting business at that point in his career. It was no surprise at all that he went on to a variety of positions on staff and command at squadron, group, and wing level. And prior to assuming his current position as Deputy Commander of JFHQ Doden, he was Chief of Staff at DISA. He's wearing a brand new second star and soon will be going to Air Force Space. We are very fortunate to have him with us today to lead our discussion. I will allow him to introduce his panel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panel to the stage.
Okay, General Wood, thank you very much for that introduction. As I was walking through with my staff of what we'd want to talk about today, the one thing they made it abundantly clear, and those who have been to these sessions over the last couple of years know that usually when I'm up here I make declaratory statements that they have to go out and execute. So they made it perfectly clear that this year do not make any statements to where they would have to do a lot of work in actually executing. So I'm going to make sure that I will not do that this year. In fact, I'll let the panel members do that if they want to their organizations, but for my organization, we will not. The title of this panel is DOD Collaboration for Success in Cyber. And I would offer that this panel is the epitome of what is required from a collaboration in DOD. And I'll talk about a little bit about each one of them as we go through. But if you think about, we have a service cyber component, we have a service, we have an agency, and we have a combatant command, and then we have myself as part of Joint Force Headquarters Doden working for General Lynn. And all of us together are constantly and consistently having to collaborate, both internally, and I think back to when you think about basketball and you're recruiting, right? And you're a big-time coach for a big-time university in a state. Well, the first thing you want to do is you want to tighten those borders, and you want to be able to collaborate internally, and you want to get the recruits internally. And then you want to expand outside of that state to get after the talent that's in other places. And DOD really focusing on the collaboration internal to DOD, but then being able to branch out with academia, with industry, with the allies, because without all those partners, we realize that we can never be as successful as we need to be in this space. And before I kind of turn it over to them, what I'd really want to talk about to start with is, in order to collaborate, you have to have certain foundational characteristics and foundational things going for your organization, whether that's a small organization, a small business, whether that's a large corporation, or whether that's DOD. And that is, you have to know yourself, you have to know your environment, and you have to know your adversary and or the enemy. And in order to do that, the first thing you really have to do is you have to organize your battle space, right? In the Department of Defense, we're organizing our battle space for sustained operations. Well, what does that really mean? What we're really trying to do, in order to truly be able to collaborate both internally and externally, is you have to bring all the organizations together under one common framework and under one common understanding. In order to do that, you have to define certain things. And so if you look at the Department of Defense Information Networks, it's a federation of organizations, and it's a federation of networks that all come together to support the department in the missions that it's been assigned. Well, what we're trying to do within Joint Force Headquarters DODN is we're organizing that battle space, and we're defining the DODN as a joint area of operation. And within that joint area of operation, you have areas of operation. And this is very similar to other domains and the doctrinal terms within other domains, because we want to be as consistent as possible as we move forward. And so as you have these areas of operations, in order to collaborate with fellow AO commanders or fellow AO directors, you have to understand your environment. And you have to understand what your terrain is in the cyber domain. You have to understand your forces, and you have to understand the reliance on other areas of operation. And bringing all those areas of operation together, and each commander or each director understanding that terrain, understanding that environment, bringing all that together to then be able to have a coherent and consistent look across the enterprise and across the JOA to make sure that our operational leaders understand the risk, understand the challenges, and understand the gaps is really where we are trying to take this thing we call the DODN. And in order to do that, we have to have the AO commanders working together to then be able to work with industry and to be able to work with other agencies. And so as I kind of turn it over to Captain Tim Brooks, who is on the G3 staff, and this is the first one that I'll turn it over to, and then I'll introduce each one of them as we kind of go through. So before he became on the G3 staff, he worked as the G7 8th Army, coordinating information operations activities and strategic communications for that command. He's a 2014 graduate of the U.S. Army War College. He was assigned to the 1st Cavalry Division in Fort Hood, Texas, where he deployed to Iraq twice in 2006 and 2008, and then later 2009 and 2010, serving in another IO leadership position. And so he works for General Frost on the G3 staff, working cyber, and doing a lot of great things there. And I'll kind of turn it over to him to let you know what they're doing and how they're working from a collaboration standpoint.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me today and allowing me to speak on this panel. I can't describe how important communication is both within the services and between the services and industry. And importantly, what I'll challenge you with is between industry partners. That's often a seam that's very difficult for us to cross, and I hope we get the chance to touch on that today. I am the Mission Assurance Branch Chief for General Frost's DAMO Cyber, working direct report to the G3. It's a relatively new directorate. We took the Information Operation Directorate and the Electronic Warfare Directorate, squished them together, and created a Cyber Directorate, challenged with EW, IO, and Cyber Title 10 responsibilities in support of the G3. One of the big things that we do in there is our Army Platform Resiliency Mission Assurance Program, and that's an effort to respond to National Defense Authorization Act 16, Section 1647, specifically to assess risk to mission from platform vulnerabilities. Increasingly, what we're going to talk about, or what I'd like to touch on, is risk-based decision-making. Too often, when we talk about our weapon systems, we focus on either A, functionality, or B, the weapon system's vulnerabilities in its own little stovepipe. And what we're finding is to really understand our risk and prioritize investments going forward, we've got to be able to take those vulnerabilities and figure out really which ones cause risk to mission and which ones potentially can wait until we've got some extra money. As you may imagine, that could be a long wait. To do that, we realized a couple of things. The first one is the Army can't do it alone. The Uniformed Service can't do it alone. So the 1647 effort is a co-lead effort. It's a little bit different in that respect. So I co-lead this with ASALT and all the folks in the program managers' offices. The G3 can't get at this problem all by itself because obviously the program managers have got to figure out, in many cases, how to fix these vulnerabilities. So that's the first point of collaboration I'd like to touch on, is the importance of talking, particularly in this realm as we produce hardened weapon systems or we produce hardened facilities. How do we coordinate between the uniformed service that has the operational mission and the secretariat that has the responsibility largely for generating the capability? Second piece of that is we realize that these weapon systems are never one contractor that's producing. They're always a system of systems. Even something as simple as a Stryker vehicle is a system of systems. But then you take that a little bit farther and you pull it out into a joint mission thread, and we realize that not only is it a system of systems for Army weapons, but it may be 10 different weapon systems that are critical to that mission thread across the joint force. So how do we get better at talking across the joint force and to industry partners and among industry partners? All those things are enormously challenging, and that's kind of what we're trying to get at. Sir?
Okay, thank you, Tim. And we started off from a service and a mission assurance standpoint, and now we'll turn it over to Captain James Mills, who's the Chief of Staff of U.S. 10th Fleet and Fleet Cyber Command. He's a 2008 graduate of the Naval War College, Naval Command and Staff Program. He served with distinction, supporting Desert Storm, Noble Eagle, Enduring Freedom, Iraqi Freedom, and various counter-narcotics and humanitarian relief operations. Before he became the Chief of Staff, he served as Commander Task Force 1070 and Commanding Officer, Navy Information Operations Command, Hawaii. And from a service cyber component standpoint, he is the focal point for both Admiral Gilday and Admiral Price in driving both Fleet Cyber forward, but also the Navy forward, because they have inherited, I'll say inherited, the directive authority for cyberspace operations that he's really trying to drive from a collaboration standpoint internal to the service, but then that also gets to the joint fight. So, Cap Mills, over to you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, General, for the kind remarks and comments. So the Navy always likes to be unique, I guess. So we also established a unique command, U.S. Fleet Cyber Command, and it's also the U.S. 10th Fleet, and we also are a Joint Force Headquarters Cyber, but that's not enough. We're also the naval component to space for the Navy, the naval cryptologic component, and basically that has a there's a bit of a personality disorder with our staff when you have one staff and that many missions here. But what the benefit is, it brings together a multitude of different mission areas so that we also see not just a collaboration space within the cyber mission area, but also within the fleet operational area, across the span of the U.S. Navy from all of our Echelon 2 commands, the joint space, working with combatant commands, those we directly support, as well as U.S. Cyber Command. So what I'd offer is really we're in a more of a maturing, we're trying to increase the tempo and capacity of our ability to handle the defensive cyber fight. So it's one thing is organizing. We are making adjustments in how we organize that fleet, but we're also helping the rest of the Navy understand how they need to play in the defensive cyber operations, whether they have establishing a cybersecurity operations center or whether they just have need to build the right engineering and cybersecurity expertise within their domain. Fleet Cyber Command cannot do this alone from the Navy standpoint. So we have to partner both with our systems commands, our type commanders, and our fleet commanders, as well as the other entities that the Navy has. So external to the Navy, we also are a key partner with JFHQ DOD, DISA, and U.S. Cyber Command in the day-to-day battle here to protect the DOD. And also we reach out to both allied partners with the Navy-to-Navy relationships that we have across the globe, as well as have several different initiatives working with industry partners, academia, both in the research standpoint and looking for some cutting-edge type things. I guess if I would sum it up, at least the primary concerns that our commander, Vice Admiral Gilday, has, it relates to ensuring from a cyber standpoint that we're looking at the dimensions of people, process, and technology. So we have the most precious resource, of course, is our people. So obviously industry and other partners can help us in that regard. So both training our people, how we collaborate on that training environment to make sure they're the most mission-ready cyber warriors on the planet, and also that we're actively using their skill set instead of the way we're accustomed to doing that, which is throw more manpower at it, we need to be smarter in how we use our manpower. And that leads to a couple of the other points with how we process things, how we synchronize things with other commands in the Navy, and the Joint Force is an important aspect that Admiral Gilday has us looking at. We have some new organizational constructs that we're looking at, such as a forward element and other ways to organize and optimize the cyber mission force teams that we have. And then the last piece on the technology standpoint is really about another key area where industry and the research enterprise can help us, and that's with things like with automation. We cannot currently, in a way, we're skilled to fight the last cyber war as opposed to the ongoing cyber war. We need to be able to operate at machine speed. We need to be able to have that machine learning, deep learning aspects, those data analytics pieces to help us defend our networks and deploy countermeasures at a high speed. We're trying to get left of the cyber kill chain, get out of the compliance and accreditation world as the primary focus, and get more into the operational maneuver of our networks. So that's just a sense of where the Navy's going. Obviously, we cannot do it alone. So it's one team, one fight with all of our joint partners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. The next person is Colonel Kevin Seeley. He's the Acting Deputy Director of the Health Information Technology Director at the J6 of the Defense Health Agency. And if you think about the recent ransomware activity, very much in tune to the health and the medical community. So he's very apropos that he's on our panel today. He leads a Combat Support Directorate responsible for cybersecurity, emerging technologies, data and infrastructure standardization, functional integration, health informatics, clinical business applications, to operate and maintain an MHS mission for 699 military treatment facilities worldwide. Previously, he was the chief of the DHA Infrastructure and Operations, basically the chief technology officer. He was a CIO for the Air Force Medical Operations Agency. So not only do we have a medical expert here, but we also have an information technology expert here. And so, Kevin, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, General Skinner. I appreciate that. Thank you for the comments and the introduction. The healthcare is an interesting piece of the puzzle. Not unlike the challenges that are faced in a lot of the other functional areas across the DOD, we face a lot of the same things you've heard about in the previous panel sessions with the cyber threats, IoT, urban sprawl environment where we have difficulty getting our hands around a lot of the threats that are out there. We have quite a bit of differentiation in the constituency. We have commercial partners. We have our TRICARE purchase care partners. We have SPAWAR. We have DISA. We have a lot of other agencies that we collaborate with, and we really find that we have to continue to partner across the board to defend our IT urban sprawl environment. A few ways on how we're going to do that. Some of the things that we're doing today, and you heard earlier, is collapsing the federated parts of the network. We really have a joint information environment that we're bringing in together to go site by site and actually collaborate with the services, the service medical departments, to start bringing in the infrastructure pieces of the healthcare market space. We have a lot of medical devices and a lot of clinical and business systems that we have to protect and defend, and we have commercial partners and again our agency partners that we leverage to actually protect and defend those pieces of the network. The machine learning piece of this is incredibly important because we have the Trojan environment, the ransomware environment that you just heard about. We had a great catch on our cybersecurity team that actually caught some of the ransomware and actually prevented that from entering into the network. So we have a really robust environment that we're trying to share and include some of the commercial partners. And one of the other things that we're doing is that one of the differences for the healthcare market space is the threat. The health information has become on the black market. the black market actually increased the value of some of the healthcare data and the information exchange going on between the healthcare market space. So you think about personal data and personal healthcare data that actually has increased in value and is a target for increased threats. So we leverage, again, our partners with the commercial space to make sure that we can secure our devices and systems. One of the things that we're also doing is institutionalizing the risk management framework process. So there's been quite a bit of debate on risk management framework and how you apply that within the medical space. One of the things that we're doing is looking at how complex that is and how we can actually apply that to the devices and systems that we have that require the FDA approval. The Food and Drug Administration actually governs a lot of the devices within the healthcare space, and we actually have to abide by their rule set. So we have, again, another enforcing function over there to make sure that we can protect and defend those devices as well. We heard about the firmware and issues with firmware. Those things are not designed for security. I heard somebody talk about it earlier in the earlier session about it being built on instead of built in. And we do the same thing in healthcare. So again, the challenges are very much the same. Setting policy and establishing the risk management framework guidelines within the medical space, we have to eat that ambiguity. We hear a lot about what we need to do from the policy level. A lot of it can be top down, but when you get out to the mission space and actually execute it in healthcare, we really have to assess whether or not we can actually deliver safe patient care with some of the security systems that we have to put in place. So again, the only way we're doing that is eating the elephant by going site by site, device by device, and really assessing and looking at each of those devices. And the last thing I'll add is really looking at how we apply the risk management framework. Again, we have some difficulty with that across the healthcare space. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kevin. As we can see, very diverse organization, very diverse challenges, both internally to DHA, but also externally to other agencies and the medical community. So thank you for those comments. Our last panelist, but certainly not the least panelist, is Brigadier General Wetherington. He's the J6 out at U.S. NORAD NORTHCOM. He earned his commission in 1990 from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He oversees defense of cyber key terrain as well as activities of assigned cyber mission forces. He's a command pilot with more than 2,400 flying hours, including combat over Afghanistan, and kind of leading the charge from a combatant command standpoint, from an operational standpoint. He was the vice director of the J6 up on the Joint Staff, and he's done a lot of great work there, and he's continuing the trend down at NORAD NORTHCOM. So turn over to you, Weather.
Thanks, General Skinner. And you know, it's interesting in my seat to be in one of the oldest commands, NORAD, approaching 60 years, and certainly the newest combat command in NORTHCOM, and a diversity among both those commands. It's clear to me that we win this fight together as a team, but we really aren't incentivized to do that. And so I want to share with you kind of, in my mind, what the 5 key obstacles I face every day as we look to employ 2 operational cyber protection teams on critical terrain or those assets that we need to do our mission, how we protect those critical mission systems and our networks to execute both the NORAD and the NORTHCOM mission. And the things that come to my mind, the big challenges or obstacles we face are, one, the lengthy, frustrating approval process from a PMO or a system owner to put a team on a system or that terrain, right? I will tell you, technical review boards and configuration control boards do not move at the speed of operations. And it's a very frustrating process. It takes 8 months, 12 months from the start to get a team actually on systems and times. And even when you get a team on a system, some of our airborne warning and control types of command and control systems, you move to a different owner, that exact same infrastructure, same system, and you have that fight once again. So that's a big challenge. The second thing that comes to my mind, when I think about the timeline that we're deal with here, you know, when you think of historically, we've got Man Discovers Fire, we built a lot of stuff, Windows XP, and now we're trying to defend all this stuff that we built. And so our contract and funding mechanisms to do that really haven't kept pace. They're too restrictive. They lack the required language or capabilities to get that team onto a system or get the subject matter support you need to build in the idea that, hey, we have to have flexibility in this contract to go out and actively defend, to go out and hunt, to go out and do things to make it sustainable for the long haul. The third point I'd say kind of along those lines, many of the mission systems or weapon systems or capabilities we're talking about were put out in the field on the cheap. So we don't have a cybersecurity service provider identified, right? We don't have that beat cop. We've got a SWAT team. I've got a cyber protection team that I can put out there. Hey, this looks really bad. Get on here, hunt, tell me what you see, help us close these vulnerabilities. But they're not as effective if I don't have that beat cop, somebody that's out there and that says, hey, I know that hot dog cart over there at the corner is always there, but I don't see the guy who's pushing it. What happened there, and why is that black SUV parked over there? The guy that knows the environment, kind of like General Skinner alluded to earlier, that routine, that day-to-day interaction in that environment and understanding is vital to help those cyber protection teams that we're going to put out there understand what they're dealing with and become more effective. A fourth one, and a real big hitter at NORAD in particular. So if you understand how NORAD works, it's a binational command. It's unique. We have Canadians fully integrated in the staff. Everybody says, oh yeah, I get it, it's bilateral. It's not bilateral, it's binational. Okay, you can have a Canadian in the seat, and the next shift there's a US guy in that seat, okay? And so information sharing is a huge challenge on both the government side and the commercial side. I think in the government, we do a poor job of just defaulting to classifying things as no foreign, particularly when they're offensive cyber transitioning over to defensive cyber, and how do we deal with this? So that's one challenge. We have an intel gain loss and risk types of challenges to deal with. But I would also say on the commercial side, there's the competitive advantage and threats to the business model types of risks that tie everybody up. And so the incentive to share the information to effectively go out and do that mission to collaborate on defensive cyberspace operations is harder. And then the last thing I'll say is it's especially as of late with WannaCry and everything else that you pick up the paper and there's a new story every day about the latest threat, is picking the relevant out of the noise. You know, how do we prioritize? How do we bring the automation in that several folks have already alluded to? How do we deal with the 1,000 task orders that General Skinner from JFHQ DOD is going to pass our way? And how do I know if I've only got the resources and time to hit 3 today, what are those 3? And why those 3? And why those 3 for me, based on my infrastructure and architecture and the challenges we have and all of that. So it's a complex problem, and I don't think we're built to collaborate or cooperate effectively, and those are some of the obstacles in the way.
Okay. Thanks, General Weatherington. So I think before we kind of turn it over to some questions, and they made a mistake of allowing me to take control of the iPad and the questions. So the panel members are on their seats, just waiting to see what questions come in. But I think if you think about the theme of this conference, right, and you think about, you know, one of the main things is innovation. And innovate to collaborate, I think is very fitting, especially with this panel, is how do we take innovation, how do we use innovation, how do we use technology to better collaborate? Not just collaboration from a organization to organization, but collaborate from machine to machine, collaborate from compliance to compliance, collaborate from prioritization to maintenance. Because I would offer, and as General Weatherington said, you know, there are hundreds of orders out there. There are hundreds of directives. There are hundreds of patches that are available for the equipment and the capabilities that we have. And so how do we harness technology? How do we harness what industry can bring to take the existing environment that we have, because we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater when it comes to the DOD as we know it. How do we take and leverage what industry has to offer to bring us from the current state we are to the future state that will address a lot of the challenges that the panel members, both in this panel and the panel before us, kind of highlighted of where we need to go as an organization to really get at the heart of the matter of is these networks and these systems are there to ensure that our senior leaders have the right information to make the right decisions at the right time to ensure that the success of the missions that we've been assigned are truly successful. And so I think as we kind of continue this discussion both today and in the future, it's less about a technology discrete solution, because everybody has a great technology, everyone has a great tool, and they can't wait to have you see it. But knowing the environment that we are in and how do we leverage what is out there as either as a service or as a capability to bring forward, I think is really what we want to go forth on. And so waiting for questions, but so while we're waiting for questions, one of the things that I'll offer to the panel members is, what do you see as your organization's biggest challenge to effective collaboration when executing your defensive mission? And I'll open up to anyone who wants to take a stab at that while we wait for some emails and some questions.
So I'll jump on this one first. So we've been doing a lot of work with multiple different industry partners. In my program particularly, we try and sample across all of the different government agencies that have cyber subject matter expertise to bring as many smart people in the room to think creatively about how vulnerabilities could affect weapon systems. One of our biggest challenges in that, and let me start by saying, we have had great cooperation from our industry partners, very willing to share information, but we got to get even better. So we've got to get even better about talking to each other within government about tools and how we can share information between government agencies, non-DOD government agencies, and DOD. We've got to get a little bit better about how we can bring subject matter experts in from external organizations and put them on computers with their own tools, not necessarily members of that organization. But one of the areas I would like to maybe hear some feedback from the crowd is, how can we get better about talking between industry partners? It's not a real comfortable thing. Everybody wants to make sure they're very careful about their intellectual property rights. But I would challenge you, because that creates seams. That creates seams even within an individual system. I can't tell you how many PMs I've had sit down and say, well, look, we've got to trust the information that comes into our weapon system, which means that that weapon system is only as cyber strong as the weakest link in the whole chain, all of the system of systems that support it. If we can't get better about discussing those vulnerabilities and sharing information about where those vulnerabilities are between information partners and government reps, we're never going to figure out how to crack the code on this project, this problem. So there's a number of different areas, and I'd be glad to talk in greater detail about them. But one of the things I think we got to figure out is how to talk better while still respecting intellectual property rights.
So, General, I'll jump on the grenade also. I think there's 4 areas for the Navy that we have our most significant challenges related to the DCO mission. I've hit on one of these earlier. That's the situational awareness, cyber situational awareness. Part of the strategy we have is to reduce the attack surface that Navy presents to an adversary. How do you do that and also maintain situational awareness across all the networks? So, we've had some experience over the years with enterprise networks with Navy and Marine Corps Internet, and some of our overseas networks have over 500,000 clients, 75,000 servers, 45,000 roughly applications and systems, depending upon what day of the week it is and how you count. But they're not all homogeneous. It's not all the same. Enterprise networks are doing pretty well on that visibility, but when you start getting into support systems, supply systems, medical systems, combat systems, other SCADA control systems, the visibility and understanding what the assets are out there, what's their status relative to compliance, how they're ready to take on the cyber adversary is not as is a lot more fog of war than we want to have. So we need to clear that up. Second area is the area what I would call, you could say, intelligence and support of cyber or cyber intelligence, however you want to frame it. But you know what's going on in .gov, what's going on in .com, what's going on with the other services to understand. Okay, if there's intent by an adversary, where they're going to come at you. What's their key interest? What should we be maneuvering to protect more, or prioritizing in those that 1,000 orders that came from DOD? Which of those is most near term that we want to adjust to? Another is being able to operate. So when something does happen, and it will happen, you know, the Sun Tzu-ism comes out, you know, he who defends everything defends nothing. So the adversary is going to be somewhere in our networks. So when an incident does happen, how do we respond, and can we respond with agility and vigor and respond to that in sufficient speed? So another area and challenge we have is the ability to work at you know, machine speed, or the speed to respond, as opposed to waiting for, you know, manpower, to the specialist to arrive on scene, or the forensic side to bring back the data. So forensics is another area that supports that is challenging to us. And the last part is just synchronizing across those diverse mission set. How can we make sure, you know, there's trust in the data that one entity within the Navy says that's not necessarily part of the enterprise, to make sure that they are truly where they say they are. So that synchronization is another challenge we have.
And from the Defense Health Agency standpoint, again, we go back to fundamentals: people, process, policy, technology. We find that technology is not really the problem. We've been able to buy all these different technologies to help protect our devices and systems over the years. We really get back to what we have to do today in order to kind of undo some of the decisions that we had made previously. We're very good at buying things, and a lot of the things that you know, employ you all. And it's important now that we take a step back, and if you look at how you manage and secure IT within your organizations, in a sense, some of you would not have done it the way that we have done it. You got to take a step back and look at the enterprise. I have a saying, I call it act local and think enterprise-wide. We have to create the processes and policies that enable the operators in the field to do what they need to do to get their job done. That's in a way of that ambiguity. If we put too much policy and bureaucracy on top of that, that is one of our challenges. So we have to enable that agility out to the field. And fundamentally, what we're doing in the medical side, the Defense Health Agency was created to bring in what we call shared services, and those are really to deduplicate and detriplicate some of the things that we have going on across the services that don't make a lot of sense anymore. So we're applying rationalization. You've heard that term before, but where we are buying things that do the same job, we have to begin to consolidate and standardize. That will help us reduce the attack surface of the network and the medical devices and things, and reduce the variance that we have within our environment. So we're eating away at that by going kind of back to fundamentals. We have 3 different CSSPs, so we've got to begin to get one directory service, one CSSP, utilize a single email system so we can consolidate a view, an enterprise view of what's going on, an awareness of situational awareness of what's going on throughout the medical space as well. As you heard, that the vector is there, it's real, the threat's real within the medical environment, and it is very, very complex. We have over 1 million medical devices. We have about 485 enterprise systems that we use to deliver health care, another 387 diagnostic devices on top of that that we use to deliver state-of-the-art care. So we really have to look at that entire ecosystem to see how we protect that. But the challenge is pulling that triplication of effort and pulling those resources together to attack the problem as an enterprise problem.
Yeah, I already hit you with most of my challenge. I'd just say at this point it's time to recognize that the department's building capability to actively defend, and that we're going to expect that it's a trust but verify type of environment. Whether you're providing a black box that goes in a critical mission system that I have and we're just buying that box and installing it, or whether we're buying a service from you, we're going to want to put a team or teams on those systems to survey, secure, hunt, and protect, and ensure that we have the ability to conduct the critical missions we've been tasked to conduct. So.
Okay, excellent. We got a bunch of questions now, so I'll turn it over, and we'll start with General Weatherington on this one, so take a drink of water real quick, and then we'll let you get after this one. Given the size of DOD and number of diverse organizations and missions, is true collaboration possible?
I guess it depends on the definition. I would hope we could get closer. I'm one of those people, I don't think you're ever going to get perfect, but I think we're far from it. I think there are some quick wins and some things that we could do to get better. But it's really about openness. It's about trust. It's about deciding that we're all going to get more out of it by working together than the benefits of trying to stay in our own little stovepipes, whether that's from a competitive advantage standpoint, from a risk standpoint, from an incentive, a profit incentive, or anything like that. I think in the long run, like I said earlier, we win this as a team. We win this together, and we need to build in the incentives and the attitude to do that.
Anybody else want to?
Well, so I would build on that in that, I sat down with some Air Force partners the other day to discuss how we would do a mission threat, a joint assessment of a mission. And it turns out that, as you might imagine, there's not that many ways to skin this cat. We're all approaching it from generally the same direction. Our biggest challenge is figuring out who our counterpart is in the other services and then making the link up happen. Increasingly, though, we're getting mechanisms in place to do that. It's a little bit easier, I think, quite honestly, to share information within the uniformed services. Once it becomes government property, we can move it around a little bit easier by and large, and I think that helps. But our biggest challenge so far to date has been figuring out who the point of contacts are, and then, by extension, where the overlaps are, where the common systems are, who's fielding similar components across DOD. That may be something industry can help us with.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing, too. So if you look at NORAD, right now, if there's a hostile aircraft or something, some kind of event in North America, okay, a Canadian F-16 can cross the border into the U.S. and prosecute that target. A U.S. F-16 can cross the border into Canada, okay? And there's binational agreements. We could have a Canadian in the seat making a decision about an event in the United States if that's who's on duty at the time. We have a harder time taking a cyber protection team and putting on the exact same infrastructure in Canada to protect that critical mission system. And we're working through that right now. We're really working toward binational collaboration with our Canadian partners. I think you're also seeing Cyber Command to start to really move that way in a Five Eye direction. How do we share and collaborate and work together from a Five Eyes perspective in this mission space? And I think that's just going to grow.
Yeah, and I'd offer, I think at the end of the day, true collaboration it's almost like perfect collaboration, which you'll never get to. But I would offer its collaboration is also multidimensional, and there are many, many dimensions that we can have improvement on. And it goes to, again, whether it's technology, whether it's the people, whether it's teams getting on missions, teams getting on terrain. There's a whole lot of collaboration that I think that we can improve on, both internally and externally. And I think that's what we're trying to get to. So for Colonel Seeley, in your defense of health information, how are you collaborating cyber strategies with the VA and community providers to continue to progress with collaboration on soldiers' medical records without compromising the data?
So one of the forcing functions we have to push us to change, we'll get into the budget piece and the fear piece, but as many of you know, we have purchased a commercial off-the-shelf new electronic health record. And that is one of our forcing functions. We often talk about leveraging industry, leveraging the best practices within industry, and that was one of the guiding principles behind the acquisition of the new electronic health record. And that really is forcing us to look at things differently. How do we partner with a commercial partner who holds our data, who protects our data? What does that look like? What we've done is we, with the Defense Health Management Modernization Program Office, is look closely at how we dovetail and marry the environments. One of the reasons why we're going out and collapsing the network environment is so that we can reduce the attack footprint, get a fixed number of gateways so we can watch the traffic and understand what it is we're seeing, and work closely with our commercial partner. And when I say work closely, this is a new relationship, so we are establishing liaisons. Our cybersecurity service provider is establishing liaisons so we can keep real-time communications, real-time fusion of threats and information, so we can assess what threats are coming at us. And as we get our arms around that environment, we will have a little bit more ideal environment. We'll have less of the trying to pull in and look at many of the different ways we have to report on the task orders. Is we've got to look at many different environments now and try to fuse that information together. No tools to really look at it as a single reporting line. But as we bring that in, we're looking at doing that along with our industry counterparts, so we can see that as an enterprise.
Yep. Okay, excellent. I'll turn this one over to Captain Mills to start, and others can chime in. Given the focus on collaboration, how are the services working together to train the cyber mission force while supporting individual service cyber component needs? Do you see the need for a U.S. Cybercom sponsored training school?
Okay, an easy one. Okay, so in the area of persistent training environment, we have a series of different, I think, very good collaborations ongoing, both with the Cyber Command J7, all the services. From a standpoint, there's both the individual focus, partnership with U.S. Cyber Command, some other agency contributions to that, internal service schoolhouse arrangements that we're making. So there is a, I can't speak in detail for every service, but I know from the Navy standpoint, we are putting together both the joint opportunities, service unique opportunities, and then we're working with industry and have done so for the last few years since the Cyber Mission Force stood up, looking for partners with industry and with companies that basically have niche capabilities that can help fill in the training aspects that we're short on. And a lot of that has been, there's both on the mission force offensive side, we've had that training for some time, and then the defensive side is probably the one that we're playing catch up a little bit with and getting those capabilities. I think from a service standpoint, there are some joint roles. Each of the services, divided up there's a training transition that's going to be coming in the next couple fiscal years. Some things that Cyber Command has shepherded are now going to be shifted back over to the services to manage for joint training of our cyber teams. So that is divided among all the services. So that is by definition, a collaborative effort. On the exercise front, we have a series of exercises that have ranged from working with industry partners, DHS, working on some things that were closer to the home front and helping there, working with the National Guard. There's exercises like Cyber Guard, Cyber Flag, that are very extensively, very thorough evaluations of our teams, and all allow for that cross collaboration and sharing among the best practices that each of those teams have. For example, I think the Missouri National Guard, as I recall, a couple of years was probably one of the better better teams, and they had a lot of those practices were shared with other teams. We also have Canadian, UK, other Five Eyes type partners have been involved in that, and so I think in this area, we've demonstrated collaboration, we've demonstrated partnership with industry. It is going to be a growing area, both partnership with academic institutions that have developed some of this, as well as corporate entities, and there's probably lots of opportunity to come here in the next few years as we mature that training pipeline. There's one last thing I'll mention is an initiative we've had at Fleet Cyber Command with the it's called cyber aptitude testing. So we're not only doing the training requirements, we're also looking at the individual sailors and civilians that are within our cyber mission force, and also we have Army and Air Force teams as well that this will apply to. But looking at taking an aptitude test that looks at whether their skill set and their personal makeup, basically what's the best thing for them to do. You know, where are they going to thrive the most? Which type of role within the cyber mission force will that be? So we have a multitude of initiatives in that area.
Okay. The only thing I'd offer is, when you see do you see the need for U.S. Cyber Command to have a sponsored training school? I would offer, the services are responsible for organized training and equipping. And I think Cyber Command's role is help from a joint standard standpoint and working collaboratively with the services, collaboratively with the agencies who have capability also, collaboratively with the combatant commands, working together to define those training standards, to help define the functional standards, the mission functions and tasks, and move forward from there and let the services collaboratively, again, working together, because as Cap Mills talked about the aptitude test, the Air Force is doing something similar, and so is the Army, and so I know that they're continuing to collaborate, because it really gets back to, and I offer more so than just training, it's talent management writ large. Now, I know industry is having, I'll say, significant challenges, and they're also having significant opportunities in managing the talent that is out there, both from a government standpoint and from an industry standpoint. I think working together, both internally from an organized train and equip, training standards, talent management overall standards, and then collaboratively with industry to figure out how to best provide professional development for our force as they continue to mature and as this domain continues to mature, I think is going to be very important. So for Colonel Tim Brooks, you mentioned communication between industry partners as an area for improvement. Can you expand on where this has become problematic and why?
Sure, thank you. So a couple things I would highlight. First, I would echo the comment earlier about the lengthy and frustrating approval process to put a cyber protection team or a red team or some other sort of team on some of these weapon systems, on some of these maintenance support devices, on some of the subcomponents of the weapon system to try and better understand our vulnerabilities. We do a really good job identifying vulnerabilities during the procurement and development process. But once we get into life cycle and we put a system into sustainment, we are much less good, let me say, at keeping up with the vulnerabilities of those systems. So how do we translate what we do during procurement to the life cycle maintenance of the system, and how do we get better at putting subject matter expert aggressor simulations onto weapon systems where we may never have anticipated and needed to do that in the past? That's one of the areas. The second one I would suggest we've had some challenges with is access to system code that is not necessarily government-owned code. These systems, as you know much better than I, are compilations of multiple different pieces of code on multiple different boxes. If the government doesn't own it, or we can't get access to the software assurance measures that it has gone through, we have very limited ability to understand our risk profile. So the second point I would make is access to non-government-owned code and how we share that across industry partners. Obviously, you don't want to give up the code because you've got millions of dollars invested in its development, but how do we share it with other people that have boxes on that same weapon system so that we can develop our overall profile? The final thing I would suggest is a huge challenge is deep visibility of supply chain, and particularly places where you have common parts that may run across multiple systems that a company produces, or may run across multiple systems that multiple companies produce. So, and primarily what I'm talking here is commercial off-the-shelf parts, but even in some proprietary parts, deep visibility of where the supply chain goes and who's producing the fully programmable logic cards and all the other components of those systems, I think is an area where we've got some challenges.
I can add to that for the healthcare industry. Again, a lot of the devices and systems that we purchase we have to buy them from commercial vendors that do not design them for security. They design them for patient safety and patient care. And working with them in advance is where we work with HHS, NIST, and FDA is getting vendors to look at the policies, look at the guidance that's coming out, both at the federal and state level, to look at what they need to do to change their posture and the build and engineering of their devices and their systems. So that is a key component of, I think, the collaboration that we have with industry.
Okay. For General Weatherington, but others can add on after this, what new DOD enterprise solutions do you see evolving to support more efficient foreign partners' information sharing?
Well, great question. I wish I was the technical expert or the innovation expert. I think we're seeing some things already in terms of MPEIS and some ideas like that about how do we consolidate these various mission partner networks and different evolutions or different innovative approaches to sharing information. They've sprung up everywhere, and I think that's part of the challenge is they're all unique. They all are tailored for a particular situation, and so moving toward an enterprise solution is definitely where we need to go. I think it's always challenging, and I think a lot of times those things are easier to develop in a bilateral way. So we'll give you permission to do this very specific exchange with these very specific partners, and it's hard to grow it from there. So I don't know if I have a better technical answer to that. You probably have more insight on the MPEIS or other aspects that DISA might be working, I guess.
Well, the joint information environment, the way it's been defined, is really the environment that's going to get us there. The question that came up earlier is, can we do this because of the size? Again, if you have good policy and you provide the ability for the operators to work within the guidelines, then it can be done. And some of this really does have to be a top-down push. We've got to begin to rationalize that environment. We've got to pull in those mission partner environments and have visibility on them. Absolutely.
Okay. Budgetary constraints always seem to thwart innovation. How do you balance your tactical requirements and business as usual with innovative ideas and new solutions that require funding, new procurements, et cetera?
So I'll start. I'll just tell a story. So as General Skinner alluded to, I spent most of my career flying airplanes and not thinking about some of these more complex challenges that you guys have grown up dealing with for most of your lives. So I'm having a conversation with my team a couple weeks ago, and we just high-fiving each other around the room about, hey, we just transitioned successfully to SharePoint 13, and it was hard and it was arduous, and there were a lot of challenges, and we had some things that broke along the way, and working through that. And then when you sit and think about it, you realize that all that angst and all that big challenge and that effort that we put in put us 2 generations behind the current generation. And it was that big of a challenge and caused that much pain across the command in terms of collaboration and things we were doing. And so we can't live that way. And so I asked one of my smartest guys, I gave him a new task. I said, hey, somebody needs to help us think about where we should be, not tomorrow, not yesterday. Where do we need to be in 10 years, in 5 to 10 years? And how do we get there? How do we leapfrog to that? And I don't think there's an easy answer. I don't know what it is, or we would have done it already. But I do see us spending a lot of time and energy because of the diversity, because of the unique architectures and environments that we're dealing with, and we spend a lot of time pedaling really fast to get to yesterday's technology today. And we're very happy with that. And I wish that there was somebody that could help us leapfrog that a little bit better.
So I'll add a couple points, I think, just from recent experiences with working with the Cyber Mission Force and getting some of those capabilities out there. You know, if we use the if we don't adjust the model of how we're building these capabilities, we're always going to be lagging behind. So, but yet we're, you know, you get the argument whether it's DOD 5000 or whether it's a budgetary process that's a constraint. But regardless, I think if we approach it from the standpoint, especially in the DCO area, of building a capability that has more of the framework, and then you have within that capability, you have the ability to adjust the tool set, which is mostly software, the ability to be more agile, and where you can plug and play, where a new capability emerges from industry or something that is tailored to the mission, the operator can then choose from that library, so to speak, and tailor it to the mission and use that capability. There's some challenges there with licensing and open source and other things we have to do, but I think from that approach, another aspect that helps us is limited objective experiments, taking small chunks, looking at different particular problems as opposed to try to eat the elephant at once. We try to take a little piece of that, see if we can chip away at a problem that's a key operational concern, learn from that limited objective experiment, and then feed it back into the acquisition cycle. You know, it's iterative. If we do enough of those, we probably would advance the capability. Another thing is there are some capabilities we have out there, like for example, afloat, there's one program that our ships have on there with their networking system, and there's always this argument, well, they don't understand their network enough. Well, there's actually other capabilities that are embedded. It's just we haven't got the training community to train the systems administrators properly so they know how to exploit those tools. So if you recompose some of the capabilities we already have and bring them together, we're also finding that that will provide new insights and learning. And I think the last thing that is paying dividends, at least for the Navy case, is we have several initiatives that we've done with industry and academia where we have, you know, whether it's internships or some other type of crosstalk forum where we can get that information and exchange of ideas. That's also been helpful, I think, to get at this.
Okay. So I'll ask a question, but then I'll answer a question before, and I'll let you guys think about that question first. How are you dealing, in the spirit of collaboration and partnerships, how are you dealing with industry poaching trained cybersecurity specialists as soon as they complete training and their tour of duty? But before we get to that, there's a question for JFHQ DOD, which I figure I'll take, since General Weatherington is the one that really brought this up, and I would have thought that JFHQ DOD supplies the beat cop on the net that Brigadier General Weatherington is looking for. If this isn't the case, who is the enduring presence on the net? What I'd offer is there are a bunch of beat cops on the net, but what I'd offer is I look at General Lynn as the police commissioner. And he's a police commissioner from an operational standpoint that really is identifying what the priorities are. Now what I'd offer is there are a lot of patches required. There's a lot of STIGs that need to be fixed. There's a lot of, I'll say, adversarial activity that we want to do additional things outside of IAVMs, outside of STIGs that we want to get after. And so General Lynn, in fact, I'll offer in the last 3 weeks, he put out another email out to senior leadership that says, here are some significant no-fail missions that we need your attention as a commander and as a director. We don't want your J6s or your CIOs or your information technology specialists, which they're all very good, and we appreciate all the hard work that they do, but this is commander business. And that's really part of the collaboration and part of the cultural framework that we're trying to change is this is commander's business. This isn't, don't just turn it over to your CIO or turn it over to your IT specialist and say, go do and just tell me if there's a problem at some point in time. They need to be actively engaged because this affects their ability to do their mission. It affects their ability to generate revenue from an industry standpoint. It affects our ability to generate sorties, to generate mission capability. And so this is really commander business. And so General Lynn, as the police commissioner, is actually going out and providing priorities. But again, there are still a whole bunch of actions and activities that still have to be done. And as we continue to move forward and continue to mature as a department, we're also looking at, from a prioritization standpoint, is adversary activity and adversary capability to feed into this prioritization scheme, along with the critical train, or the criticality of the train. So continuing to move forward, but there is a prioritization, there is beat cops, and there is a police commissioner.
Can I just add on that? So when I mention no beat cops, or there are some places without that, I'm not talking NIPRNet and SIPRNet. I'm talking about battle control system fixed, the primary command and control node for doing airborne warning and control in the U.S., or you know, C2BMC, or things like that that are mission systems that maybe we've had a harder time thinking about as in terms of cybersecurity and defense from a network perspective, but which are really the critical elements of doing the business that we do out at NORAD Northcom, right? It's not necessarily a network. It's a mission system.
Okay. So going back to the previous one about collaborative poaching.
Okay, I'll jump on that one first, I guess. So what I would say, again, from the standpoint, this is about collaboration, about partnership. We cannot, you know, the message of we cannot do this alone. We have to do this both coupled with industry, academia, our allied partners. So there's not enough cybersecurity, cyber warfare, DCO experts in the nation. We know that. We have to essentially grow our own, which, you know, ties back to that training question. And it is true we have some shifting of, you know, someone will go between the different services. Maybe an agency will, you know, take your cyber superstar, or at some point, you know, when their service obligation is over, someone in the audience here will attract them, and they'll be off and running in a completely different job on a different economic scale. So we know we have limitations on how we can respond to that. I'll offer two perspectives. One perspective is, again, back to that partnership. This is about the strength of the entire team, the nation here. It's for the nation. So if they are working on within a corporation that has U.S. interests in mind, and maybe DOD's, you know, is able to assist the Department of Defense, that's to our benefit. So that means we have the right smart people helping look out for our nation, looking out for the strength of our nation, you know, our economic strength, our intellectual or industrial and political strength. But the last couple things I would say is, if they stay within the DOD mission, they can see immediate impact. They have the ability. This warfare area is maturing. They have the ability to shape that. It's also full spectrum. Not just defense, you know, just like basketball or football, you know, there's also an offense. So there's ability what we have that they can cover both spectrums, and also they're going to get exposure to a wide range of missions that they would not if they were within one company. So I'd say there's lots of benefits to stay in, but obviously as long as it's helping the nation and the DOD, you know, I think we all understand.
We'll see. Nothing happens in the government till the money moves. There's not enough dollars to get everywhere we need to go. And it's time to reconcile that with the demands being placed on the entire organization for cybersecurity. I think I had heard it in an earlier panel. We've got to focus the investments and the resources that we have on managing the risk that we have today. It is huge for across the department, whether you're talking about weapon systems or healthcare. It is something that we have to come to grips with. These are difficult decisions. They are laced with fear and loathing in some cases, and You are not going to do it out of the kindness of your hearts, whether you are an agency or a business. These are the things that we have to come to grips with and make some difficult decisions. Now, what I normally talk about is there's opportunity here because we cannot do it without other agency partners. We can't do it without our industry partners. We've got to come together and see that there's opportunity. It may not marry up with your current agency policy or doctrine. It may not marry up with your current business model. But it is a way forward. You see where we need to go. You see that we have to have an enterprise approach. How do we segment that off and come and apply an enterprise approach? Because the only way to really react is to understand and have situational awareness of everything that's going on within your environment.
Yeah, I was just going to add, let's not forget the guard or the reserve component side of this as well. We enjoy the great benefit from one of our OPCON CPTs is the 301st CPT, which is a conglomeration of 6 Air National Guard units on a rotational basis, expertise from Washington, a couple teams from Washington State, Iowa, Texas, Maryland, and Kansas, I believe, and you know, that's another opportunity for folks that have another job doing things with you in industry and the private sector that also get a chance to enjoy the benefits of a unique and exciting mission and doing some of the things they get to do when they're on our time. And so I think that's an important point.
Yep, excellent point, Weather. And you know, I was going to talk to the total force. And to me, at the end of the day, it's all about collaboration. It's collaboration with technology, it's collaboration on processes, and it's collaboration with people. Because at the end of the day, it's all interrelated, and we're all interconnected, and we're all here to support and defend, at least we're here to support and defend the Constitution, but we're all here as partners and teammates. And what I'd offer, and I know that there was a lot of questions that we did not get to, at least I will stick around if anyone wants to bring that question, the question that you had on email with us. I appreciate your time. I hope this was informative, because at the end of the day, we're partners, and we want to continue moving forward as partners.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant General Bob Wood back to the stage to formally thank the panel on behalf of AFCEA and our audience.
Thank you very much. I particularly was struck by a couple things. General Etherington, I always thought flying an airplane was a complex challenge. You demystified that for me just a little bit. And General Skinner, thank you for mentioning it's becoming commander's business, and the idea that DISA is stressing that. I think one of the more reassuring and productive aspects of what we're doing in this cyber business is more and more by component, by service, by team, it's becoming more and more not just a technical challenge, it's becoming commander's business. So I really appreciate that keynote. That is the panel wrap-up for this afternoon. I would like to, before I release him from the stage, one is tell him on behalf of this panel we are offering donation to the Fisher House in the name of this panel. We thank you for your time and your insights and experience here on full display on stage. I'd like to talk to the audience for a minute and tell you about what we have coming up tomorrow, because it's a good full day. We're off to a great start. The doors are open behind us. I've just gotten word that the floor is ready to open. So before you release for that and the reception that we have in store for you between 5 and 7, we have a full agenda for the next 2 days that I'd like to simply mention. I'd suggest downloading the app, because the AFCEA 365 app helps you navigate the variety of offerings. This was somewhat simpler today in terms of we had keynotes and panels. Well, tomorrow we have theaters, solution symposiums, you name it. We have an enormous amount of information that is available on the app. And also on the app, you have a Rate This Session. And if you give us your ratings and insights, as General Shea has pointed out, we're truthfully always open to suggestions, comments, and a way to improve. And we look forward to your comments. There are 5 concurrent theaters tomorrow, and they kick off tomorrow at 8:15. The day itself kicks off at 8 with coffee in the exhibit hall, but at 8:15 the theaters begin. To maximize your time networking and interfacing with our industry partners, we've located the theaters around the exhibit hall. It's a very large hall this year. I draw your attention to the information posted on the wing boards, giving details on the sessions and a map of the exhibit floor showing the location of each theater. And these theaters are located, distributed so that the sound won't interfere, we hope. And we again point out that they begin at 8:15 with a variety of topics. Also starting at 8:15 and running throughout the day will be the Industry Innovation Showcase located on the 100 aisle of the exhibit floor. This showcase is a growing and important part of this symposium to show how innovative ideas in industry can address current DOD cybersecurity challenges. Many of you in the audience are part of that solution and have been great partners bringing these solutions to the floor. Over 65 proposals came in on a problem set. You see the 4 there. And we sorted them through. We looked at about 7 solutions, representative and good, and we offer those in part of the theater. At 9:30 here in this hall, Dr. Stephen Walker will address the symposium theme from his perspective as the acting director of DARPA. We really look forward to that discussion on DARPA and their work in innovative technologies. And we're very pleased that at lunch tomorrow we are able to bring a key leader from industry, another perspective, Mr. John Shimoni, Senior Vice President and Chief Security Officer for Dell, to present his unique perspectives and take your questions. The face-to-face exchanges of ideas is paramount to the ability of industry and government to work together. To continue that exchange of ideas and exploration in the areas of cyber, we have several upcoming events I'd point out as AFCEA that may be of interest to you. From August 7 through 11 at Fort Gordon, we have TechNet Augusta, which will address cyberspace and electronic warfare operations in multi-domain battle. TechNet Augusta is rapidly growing. You'll notice I gave a full week's worth of dates rather than our usual Tuesday to Thursday because there's a full week of activities at Augusta, and check the website and plan accordingly. From October 23rd to 25th here in Baltimore in this center, we have the MILCOM here, focusing on military communications and innovation priorities for the modern warfight. And TechNet Asia Pacific Cyber Operations for Mission Assurance and Resiliency, once again in Honolulu coming up, TechNet Asia Pacific. If you have any questions on these events, talk to the AFCEA booth right out here behind you as you depart. As we move to the exhibit floor for tonight's reception, I call your attention to the wing boards where a list of companies that are new exhibitors and sponsors with AFCEA are displayed. As you visit the industry partners on the floor, please be sure to stop by and welcome these new partners in the work that we do together. We now invite you to join in the exhibit hall openings and reception, generously sponsored by CenturyLink, Sienna, and iTech Fed from now until 7 p.m. this evening. Thank you very much for your attendance today. We'll see you in the hall.